Good afternoon. My name is Alexandria Aglio, and today I will be discussing with you case 1 is an adoptive mother entitled to maternity leave. This is for Business 343 with Professor Lockhart at Liberty University. Today for our agenda, we are going to be covering first the case question. We're going to do a brief overview of the entire case contents and sit and discuss kind of what happened. And then we're going to go into my position with the case and where I stand as the legal counsel on the case. We're going to also discuss some research that I went through in the process of identifying possible solutions and coming to an overall decision with the case. We'll also talk about a plan of action on the next steps going forward, and then we'll wrap everything up in a conclusion and then have our references as well. Next slide. So, is an adoptive mother entitled to maternity leave? We are going to be focusing on question 2 with regards to the grievance. As an attorney for the AFSCME Local 10, develop an argument to support your client's contention that the council's rejection of Carol Fern's unpaid maternity leave request violated the collective bargaining agreement is the question that we're going to be covering. And this comes directly from the text. And so we are going to kind of deep dive into that and identify possible solutions, where things kind of went wrong, and how she should be represented going forward. Next slide. So some case content. So Carol Fern is a tax clerk for Bainbridge Borough. She's been there for 18 years and has a substantial career with the corporation. Her and her husband they went through some fertility struggles, and they ended up deciding that they were going to adopt. And they submitted their request to become adoptive families, and they were notified, which I'll cover in the next slide, but they were notified that a child was made available. And so she decided that she was going to stay through the tax season before the formal adoption occurred. Her position in this case is represented by Local Union 10, chapter of the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. Next slide. So here's our case timeline. So on April 22nd, she was notified of a 3-month-old baby girl available for adoption. And 5 days later, she requested for 2 weeks of paid vacation from 2 May to 17 May. She made this decision in order to finish the busy tax season, because we all know that tax season ends on April 15th. And so she stayed in order to ensure that all of her accounts were closed out and that she helped all of her clients necessary. And then during that 2-week period is when she started her paid vacation leave, which she requested to take time off and was paid for. That request was approved by the Bainbridge Borough Council, and so she went on leave from 2 May to 17 May. The day before she was supposed to return, she put in a request for 6 months of unpaid maternity leave, and that request was denied by Bainbridge Borough in a 4-3 vote. But on the other hand, she was approved for a 2 successive 90-day blocks of unpaid reasonable purpose leaves instead of just approving the maternity leave, which brings us to where we're at right now. On 1 June, she filed a grievance in accordance with Article 10, Section 4A, unpaid leaves. Next slide. So my position. As an attorney, the council's rejection violates the collective bargaining agreement, and it's very simple. The Section 5 outlines that maternity leave shall be granted at the request of the employee, and the agreement doesn't necessarily specify if the mother must be the biological parent of the newborn. In their case, she was the adoptive mother, and the council realistically should have allowed her to take her 6 months of leave, and therefore should have approved her original request. Excuse me. Next slide. Fern requested the paid vacation days and then decided that she would need more time for the transition with a new baby. For any of the parents that are out there, we know that the transition has not come easy. And with FMLA, she's able to take 6 months of leave given the time that she's been with the corporation. Her request for unpaid leave, intentionally postponing her adoption, benefited her employer, and so she looked out for the employer and gave them plenty of time to make an actual decision that benefited both the employer and her in the long run. It's important in this position to weigh both the contract and the employee's dedication when approving the maternity leave request. Her request did not go beyond the bounds of maternity leave because it did not exceed the 6-month parameters. Next slide. So some research that I did in the process of this, right? So according to recent data from the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, which outlines a lot of things that help us identify rights and wrongs when it comes to labor, is only 17% of all U.S. workers have access to paid maternity leave. Most people that take maternity leave actually take it unpaid. So the FMLA grants employees the 12 weeks of unpaid job protected leave for placement of a child for adoption or foster care, and this applies directly to Carol Fern's case. Most workers that are denied FMLA are not full-time employees. They haven't worked there for long enough, or simply because their employer is too small. So with FMLA, moving over, you have to meet certain parameters, right? So you have to work for a covered employer in order to qualify for FMLA. You have to have a minimum of 1,250 hours in the previous calendar year, and you must work for a company or agency with 50 or more employees. And then the big one that gets a lot of people is that you must work for that company for at least 12 months at a minimum. And she had been there for 18 years. So there was plenty of coverage and she met all the basic requirements. Next slide. So plan of action. The first thing that we're going to do as legal counsel is we're going to request an appeal from the Bainbridge Borough. And then in the hopes of that, the original maternity leave will get approved instead of the way that they approved it with the 2 days of 90 successive days. We will write a letter and provide written proof that maternity leave is the same for adoptive mothers as it is for biological mothers, regardless of the situation. And also we're going to identify that maternity leave and paternal leave laws are different depending on where you live. So we will do some state coverage to make sure that she's covered with regards to her state. So to wrap everything up, employees may take FMLA before the actual placement or adoption of a child if the absence of work is required for the placement of adoption or foster care. And Carol Fern is entitled to the request for maternity leave and should be paid for her years of service to the organization. Her 2 successive 90-day reasonable purpose leaves are not meant for maternity leave, and therefore she should have been approved for the original request. Do I have any questions?